Off studio mode. There you are. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a wonderful guest here today. We're going to be, we're going to be talking a little bit about all of the labor action that is happening all around the country.
Hassle.
A couple days ago, I just shamelessly ripped and exploited the labor of Jonah Furman here, who's joining me, as I took your Facebook post and blasted it out on Twitter about the mass demonstrations that were occurring, the labor actions that were occurring all around the country. Hold on one second. Where is the... I'm just going to post it real quick. I'm just going to find it real quick, rather. And I wanted to have you on. Alex Press
better not buy
keeps telling me that I should have you on. So I was like, all right, fuck it. I hate the working class. I'm sure you're familiar with this.
Yes.
I'm a disgusting capital owner, capitalist pig myself. I love exploiting workers. But I wanted you to come on and defend why labor unions are important and why labor militancy is important, what's going on in the world of labor reporting. I said, this seems like a big deal. Wonder why we don't hear more about it in the media. Perhaps they should hire more labor reporters. When you did your union roundup, lots of strike activity around the country. Some of these potential strikes that you mentioned on that now outdated list have already authorized strikes, including the historic IATSE strike that was approved by 98%?
Yeah.
So yeah, without further ado, here is Jonah Furman.
To defend all things working class. Yeah, I mean, I'm known among my friends as a pessimist, but I think we are in something like a strike wave, the beginning of something like a strike wave. So we can do the history, we can do the present, but we're looking at, in the next couple weeks, we could see 100,000 workers on strike in this country, which is something aside from some of the teacher strike waves that people remember from like 2018, 2019, for a few days and weeks, we might have hit that number, but decades, probably, not in my lifetime, except for one big strike in the 90s, have we gotten to those kinds of numbers. So something's clearly happening. And I cover this stuff for Labor Notes, labornotes.org. We cover the labor movement from the perspective of the members. And if you talk to union members today, there's way more fighting, way more, like militancy, we say. There's way more something like, a class consciousness, an idea that what's the deal that we're getting is not fair, and we're ready to do something about it. So, there's plenty we could talk about. The IATSE strike is 60,000 workers who work on film and TV sets.
Yeah.
There's like 40,000 healthcare workers in California and Hawaii who are about to announce their strike authorizations.
Before we talk about all of that, and we should definitely get to that, I think you should treat this audience as people who have never even heard of what a fucking labor union is.
Right.
There are a lot of people who are obviously members. There are a lot of unionized workers in my community as well, but there's also a much larger, broader audience of Americans who have never even heard of what a labor union does. I try to communicate that effectively to them all the time. But like, for example, the reason why the IATSE strike is historic and important is because, well, one, it's a private sector strike, which is a little bit different than the public sector strikes, right? And also it's not a wildcat strike, whereas like the 3 years ago, the Oklahoma teachers and the Kentucky teachers and teacher strikes that were happening all around were wildcat strikes. You want to talk about the differences between those two things real quick?
Sure. Yeah, we can talk about that. So these are like, unionized workers, meaning they have a contract. It expires at a certain time. This is an agreement they have with their employer. It's legally binding, and it comes up. And then once a contract is up, certain things are just off the table. They're like, we need to get a new contract and we'll fight for it. So like the IATSE case, these are people bargain. They work on film and TV sets. They run the cameras. And for decades, I mean, since, I don't know, the 40s, they've had a contract, a union contract saying, here are our rights and benefits. They're legally binding, and there's recourse if you don't follow them. It's not like a non-union workplace. Most people, 90% of people who work for a living, work in the U.S., work in a non-union workplace. That means, you might have heard of at-will employment. You can just be fired for any reason. Your boss holds all the power. A union is basically reorganizing the workplace, not completely, not like full workers control, but it's legally binding. It's usually based on decades of things like wildcat strikes, people taking action. Then you settle it into a contract that gets renegotiated every so often. So now we're seeing huge contracts get renegotiated in the context of the Dollar General stuff we're seeing, right? You see non-union workers put a piece of paper up saying, fuck it, we're not working today. So imagine that on the scale of a huge union with tens of thousands of members that has, lawyers and has people, shop stewards, and has union presidents, has a whole apparatus that's ready to turn the fight that would usually just be like, I fucking hate my job, into something like mini class wars all over the place. I don't know if that's a good primer for people who don't know what unions are. I can go even,
Yeah, I mean, the way I describe it is like, look, you have no control over what you do in your job. You probably hate your fucking boss. A lot of people are neets on Twitch, so they have no concept of working for wages, and the only thing they understand is mommy's chicken tendies. But for those of you who do work, you probably fucking hate your job. You probably hate your fucking boss, and there's a reason for that. You have no autonomy. You have no say in the matter. They tell you what you need to do. They can make you come every single fucking day to work, even if you need to take some time off. You have no benefits, and basically a collective bargaining done through a union is the only and most effective, and perhaps the only way that you can do it, or it's the entry point into that, is the most successful way that you can make sure that you have benefits, take time off, get better pay, make sure that some of those profits that you generate are distributed back to you.
Bizarre.
Right.
It's just
and the
fair.
Other thing,
it's just fairness.
Right. Other thing I would say is that even if you're non-union, why should you care what happens to the guy at John Deere who's union and losing his pension? Is because historically, sociologically, like, you can prove this. Union density, meaning how many people are in unions and how strong those unions are, has an effect and basically determines all this other stuff downstream. So like the IMF, which is not a pro-worker organization, has this famous study where they say, hey, when union membership goes down, income inequality goes up in direct proportion. And it's not just through the union members, but it's because when people at one workplace get wages that go up or have a pension or have good health care, it has an upward pressure on your job, even if you're non-union. So, I mean, I think the goal for every worker is to have a strong union at your workplace. But even if you're not there, if it's not going to happen for you anytime soon, if these guys win over here, conditions will go up in the whole industry and eventually across the whole economy. So that's why, I mean, even if you're just self-interested, this is why you should care about what goes on in these huge fights. And the other thing I would say is that we live in like this hellscape political, reality since the mid 70s and 80s, Reagan, all this stuff. We talk about this all the time. One of the biggest things about that is the death of the unions. I mean, killing the unions, making density go down, like skyrocket down. There used to be huge strikes. There's rarely huge strikes. There used to be, many more million union members. In 1946, 10% of all workers went on strike. That has not happened since. We're not close to that. But all the stuff we talk about and how shitty our politics are and how shitty our economy is for working class people can be explained, at least in 95% could be explained by the fact that they killed the unions. And now there's nobody holding the line for regular workers.
Yeah. You mentioned that already, but according to the NLRB, on average, a worker covered by a union contract earns 11.2% more in wages than a peer with similar education, occupation, and experience. Some of you will remember I talked about the Bessemer, Alabama strike, the unionization efforts in Bessemer, Alabama, and the Amazon distribution facility. And one thing that Amazon did because of pressure from Bernie Sanders and other groups was increase wages to at a minimum $15 an hour, which seemingly was very good in comparison to like other jobs in Bessemer, Alabama. However, there were distribution facilities in Bessemer, Alabama that were paying $22 an hour, which was much higher than the $15 an hour that this Bessemer facility was offering. So even when the media covers this sort of stuff, they routinely, perhaps because of their own material interests and their job, their stated interest under a capitalist organization of the economy, avoid that reality that in comparable sectors, unionized employees on average make more, and they also have the capacity to increase wages and even offer better benefits in non-unionized places. You also have collective bargaining agreements that encompass non-union members as well in countries like France and in many European countries, where if you look at the straight unionization number of the labor force, or the unionization percentage of the labor force, in France, I forget what it is, but it's like a lot lower than you would think. However, their agreements actually cover nearly the entirety of the of every sector. It's like 90% coverage overall, which means that they still dictate, even if they're not getting dues from these non-unionized members who are working, they still end up dictating their rights and working for better wages for them as well. Of course, here in America, that number is at 10%, and that coverage is at 10%, which is abysmally low. Like, out of all the OECD nations, I don't have this information off the top of my mind, but I would say, like, what is it? Like, it's like Turkey, and then America is like the lowest unionization fucking rates. And
yeah, there's nothing comparable. I mean, it's like, if there's American exceptionalism, it's the union strength and the labor strength in this country. And it also means, I'll just say this, like, having 10% of the people in the unions puts a huge target on the union workers' backs, right? So if you're the last people, if there's 5% of the private sector workers collecting a pension, then like every company is like, fuck, we got to get out of this pension, you know? And you see this, it's a race to the bottom. And it's not just, you know, jobs leaving the country, which people talk about, but it's like jobs going south to a city that wants to be like, we want, you know, your huge tax abatements, we want your business here, like Bessemer. A lot of those Bessemer workers came from auto plants that had run away from the north and then shut down in the south. And it's not, you know, it's because capital wants to run away to the cheapest. And if you have a shrinking island of people who are protected by a union, then the companies are like, damn, we gotta, you know, I'm gonna go in for the kill.
I have a question for you. This is kind of a question from the chat as well. I think this will be good and informative. So people always say, well, what about, you know, when you unionize at your workplace and then your boss still decides to fucking move the manufacturing overseas? What do you say to that, Jonah?
I mean, there was huge fights over this in the 80s. All this stuff of you know, what's legal for them to do after unionize, what your rights are, it's just a power question. I mean, the reason that happens, when it happens, a runaway shop is what they call it, you know, you organize and then the company leaves, is because our political system allows it to happen and our unions are too weak to stop it. In other places, you know, there are fights where they've won to keep the jobs where they are. I mean, this happens frequently. They're just not as high profile as the ones that lose. But basically the question is power. You know, if it'd be a very different story if a president said, we're not going to let this company run away. We're going to actually do, you know, Trump talked about this stuff and it was just bullshit. I mean, he never actually did any of it. That was the whole thing. He was like, oh, the Carrier air conditioner plant in Indiana, we're not going to let any of those jobs, you know, leave the country. That's his campaign line. And then he's in office, huge tax cuts, huge availability for capital flight, and they leave the country and nothing happens about it. So, I mean, part of it is, it's all of that is attributable to weak unions and a weak, you know, no labor party, no one who represents the workers in the political sphere.
And to jump off that point, a great example always comes to my mind, at least, or a horrifying one when you think about it. The No Evil vegan food company that, you know, successfully squashed union efforts. They did a lot of union busting, and then ultimately still ended up deciding to downsize and not offer protections to their workers regardless, despite their promises of like, offering better workplace and better safety conditions. So that's the interesting part about it. For chatters who constantly ask me these questions, guys, they're going to do whatever the fuck they want. Your capital owners, your bosses, they're going to do whatever the fuck they want. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to increase shareholder value. You are not going to have any say, but at the very least, when there is a union, that union can, I don't know, push for right of first refusal or other benefits in the inevitable outsourcing that occurs, right? I mean, they can still, at the very least, make your transition away from a company like this that decides to downsize regardless, a little bit easier. offer you better compensation for all the work that you had originally put in. But regardless of whether you know, regardless of whether your workplace is unionized or not, if your bosses want to fucking leave and if your boss want to outsource, unfortunately, given the structure of how our American politics works, they can do whatever the fuck they want for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides of it. Like, if it's true, if you're just like black pilled and you're like, capital has all the power, what's the fucking point? Like, there's all these counter examples that don't make sense then. So like, I'm thinking like last week, these people who work at the San Francisco baseball park, they're Unite Here Local 2, they want a $7 an hour raise, and these are they're making like whatever $15 to $20 an hour to start with. So how does that happen if it's really true that you just can't fight and win? The answer is there's a calculus there. If you make it more painful for the boss to do what they want to do than to do what you want to do, and this is the strike weapon. I mean, this is why strikes matter, because your leverage is we're going to stop running the company, right? Like 60,000 film and TV workers go on strike. There's no film and TV. It doesn't matter what the company wants. Same at John Deere. 10,000 workers are talking about a strike there. If you stop making tractors, there's no John Deere. So, the question is, how do you use that power? And I think my take is, like in the Democratic Party, we've seen a lot of politics, the labor movement needs to figure out how to use that power again, and too often is scared to use it or thinks it's too, the risks are too high. And suddenly we're seeing workers and unions say, fuck it, we're going to go for it.
Yeah. So what do you think is going on that has, kick-started this mass labor action that's occurring, especially 2 weeks after you literally wrote, and I'm going to call you out for this, about how fucking devastating and how shitty like how dire and bleak the future for workers look like on Twitter. Because I remember seeing that, and I was very discouraged. You literally, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but you were basically like, man, in comparison to the fucking 70s and 80s, like, we're seeing a little bit of labor momentum, but it's fucking dog shit.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, first of all, to put it in perspective, like, we talk about 2018 and 2019 as like this huge teacher strike wave, and it was a big deal, but it was the same amount of strike activity as 1986, which nobody is like, 1986, man, that was like the best year for workers. You're like deep in the Reagan years, deep in the union busting years, 5 years after Patco. So I would say, to keep it in perspective, we are not at like, the levels, like I said, in 1946, when 10% of workers went on strike. I mean, that would be, 17 million people striking. We're talking maybe we'll get to 100,000. So we're not close to those levels. That's still true. But I would say there are things coming together. I would think one of the big things that I think it is like, we keep hearing about this labor shortage, and
Yes.
the New York Times and the media likes to be like, the protagonist of this story is the small business owner who cannot find someone to flip burgers at the price they want, right? But the other side of that, not just the other side of people who don't want to work for a shitty wage, is that you have people still working who are working in workplaces that are like, at 70%, 50% of the staffing they were 2 years ago. So you have like, you see this everywhere. There's like school bus drivers who there's not enough drivers to fill the routes. So the rest of the workers just say, fuck it, we're going on strike. We can't handle the workload. You see this at Kellogg's strike right now. You have people who are working like, 100 hours, like 80-hour weeks for 100 days in a row. This understaffing thing, the other side of that, from inside the blue collar workplaces especially, is insane overwork, forced overtime. This is in healthcare, this is in transit, this is in manufacturing. So I think that's a big part of it. Another big part of it is like, people just went through hell, 18 months of hell to work job. I'm not talking about people, like me. I'm a journalist on my computer and I get to stay at home and type. And I'm talking about people who like work at UPS. And
no, the real victims of society, Twitch streamers.
Yes,
that's
the heroes, the frontliners.
Yeah, the frontline workers, Twitch streamers. I went through hell.
That's right. That's right. Every day. But I think people are like, it's different with unions because you have this routine of the contract comes up. So now you have workers like at John Deere. I'm talking to all these workers at John Deere. They, their contract is up after 6 years. It happens to be coming at a time when John Deere's making crazy money. They've all been working forced overtime for as long as they can remember. and their wages are like shit. And nobody new wants to come work at John Deere. So they can't even fix the staffing problems they have, right? So if you're stuck in this job, you are facing a workload like you never had before. You just got called heroes for a year and a half, but your life sucks. And your company, a lot of these companies are doing, the K-shaped recovery. Like a lot of them are doing great outside of a few industries. They're doing just fine financially, especially because half these companies have like, a ton of money invested in Wall Street. So they're just like halfway finance companies anyway.
Yeah.
But, it's like if you look at that situation, it's a lot different than like, 5 years ago where you're just like, I'll take it. Right now it's like, my life sucks. I just got screwed for so long and I'm not going to fucking take it anymore. And if you talk to some of these members, that's kind of the punchline for some of them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that this is for the first time ever, because I mean, the Alan Greenspan quote comes to mind about a tight labor market being bad for the economy overall. But this is it. It genuinely feels like this is a tight labor market, or at least for the first time in my like 10 years of doing political commentary and coverage on this sort of stuff, where the Chamber of Commerce is like fucking losing their minds, trying to pressure the government to just be like, dude, you have to do something. They cut they cut UI benefits early in so many of the states. What, 8 million people have been kicked off of coverage, but only 197 new jobs, like 197,000 new jobs. Like that is a disastrous proposition. And they basically think that, and when I say they, I mean capital owners, those who have an interest in the stock market and their stocks performing well, the shareholders, people sitting on boards, the CEOs, they want to starve out the working class until they can no longer say, all right, I'm going to keep holding out. Greenspan called for a necessary level of worker instability. Yeah, that was the better than my paraphrasing.
He has some amazing quotes that are like, just like talking about how unions are bad for, big business, like all the stuff that they kind of like try to muddy the waters on. But yeah, I mean, I think the tight labor market thing is real. It's clear that people are not taking jobs that otherwise they would have 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, which just means that it's not just, don't think about the business owner, what they have to entice, bring people in. It means that if you work at a place and you see nobody's going to fill your job if you strike or if you ask for a raise, they're not going to be able to replace you. That's always the threat. They're like, go get another, I can fill you in 2 minutes, right? We got 50 people outside.
Yeah.
But that's just not true. And you can look around and it's clearly not true. So if you know that as a worker, like, I mean, there's people I'm talking to who are like, fuck it. Nobody's going to come take this shitty job. I'm not scared. I can take action now without being afraid of getting replaced or, having that leverage.
The problem that I foresee in a lot of these situations is like, how long can the working class hold out? Or is the working class across the board holding out even? Or because this is something that I've been thinking about for so long, genuinely trying to comprehend like what the reason is that these places are so short staffed. I have one scary conspiracy, not a conspiracy, but like I have one scary theory that I don't know. I think people will maybe feel a little weird about, but that one is undocumented labor force. I think that our border policies, which is also a climate change policy, is most likely contributing to the labor shortage, because I feel like and I am for documenting all workers. I'm for amnesty. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like a, fucking weirdo reactionary. I believe that that's the best possible way forward, the only ethical and humane way forward. But I do feel as though the white nativist immigration policies in the United States have created a situation where that massive labor pool of undocumented workers cannot fill a lot of these roles, because I feel like companies would often just substitute the documented workforce with just undocumented workers and laborers at a time when they felt stressed. Like specifically, I'm talking about the restaurant industry, though. Do you feel like that could be one of the causes?
I really don't know. I mean, I would have to see like if to me it's like if you talk to anybody, there's just a sense that the jobs are not worth risking your life. That's a big part of it, right? Like people will be like, why am I going to go make, for maybe for $50 an hour, people will say, maybe I'll get COVID, but not for $12 an hour. So I don't know. I feel like there's like simpler explanations that are
Oh no, no. I know. The obvious explanation is that people just don't want to fucking work for, $7 an hour to fucking wash dishes. Like no one wants to do that. These are horrible jobs, especially in the restaurant industry. They're horrible. They're backbreaking. They're punishing. We know that they're fucking dog shit because the bosses that have to now take on those roles and their family members that have to take on those roles because they can't fill those fucking positions for a multitude of different reasons keep talking about how shitty that job is. Like the New York Times a daily podcast was fucking hilarious. I don't know if you watched it on like the labor shortage. I highly recommend it because, of course, as the New York Times does, they covered extensively the side of the owners of capital, and the managers and the bosses, right? And all the bosses were like pissing, shitting, and farting themselves and crying about how fucking backbreaking the labor that they had to do was because they're so fucking short-staffed. And I'm over here thinking like, well, that's the point. Like, that's literally the reason. That's the reason why people don't want to do that shit fucking job for the shit fucking pay you want to offer them. And they felt so betrayed by their workers because the government was giving them so much money, so they didn't want to fucking work anymore. It's like, this is not charity. Like, jobs are not charity. I don't know why people fucking still have this like weird attitude. I feel like capitalists themselves have believed like that dogma is so pervasive that the capital owners themselves believe that propaganda. Like, oh, we are a family.
Right. Yeah, I mean, talking of charity really makes me think the other crazy part of the inputs on this, like when you're thinking about the company's finances right now, is that a lot of these companies just got huge government bailouts. I mean, like crazy money that there's all these cases where you're like, oh, they just got Kaiser Healthcare, huge healthcare system, biggest nonprofit healthcare system in the country, 220,000 employees. In the CARES Act, they got $500 million from the federal government, and they sent back like tons of this money. Or 500,000, something like this. They sent back to the federal government. We don't need this money. And then they turn back to the workers and say, we want to give you a 25% pay cut. And all their workers are about to strike. So what do you think? I mean, like the game is up for a lot of these employers where you're getting, whatever people call it socialism for the rich. You're getting these handouts from the government because it's a crisis, and then you turn around and it's not a crisis for the workers, right? And you get nothing passed through to you. So like, at a certain, when we do labor reporting, we tell the stories that are the most obvious. So this Kaiser shit of they're getting all this fucking money and then literally are trying to cut wages for all their new hires at this extremely profitable healthcare system. And in their notes, they're like, healthcare is so expensive because we pay you guys too much. Shit that you're just like, this doesn't pass the smell test, not to me and not to a nurse who's working there and not to a nurse who had COVID last year. You know what I mean? Like, this is like, so some of these examples are just like off the rails, and it's unclear if it's just like these CEOs have gotten so out of touch, or they just think they can get away with it, or, there's no consequence for going for the aorta, so why not?
Yeah, and there's no punishment for the government. Yeah, like that's the worst part about this is that like the entire system is designed in a way for corporations to literally do exactly this. And of course they're going to do that. They're not they're not moral. These are not moral entities. These aren't even fucking humans. They're literally operating legally at the behest of their shareholders. This is their job. This is what your boss's job is, to increase shareholder value. And if you can make more money, if you can improve your profit margin every single fucking quarter by substituting machines and then literally lowering wages or laying off workers, then you're going to do that. Now the difference is this happens in non-unionized industries all the time. Gaming comes to mind. We're on Twitch. This is your first time on Twitch, I suspect, Jonah. I don't know if you like it or not. I don't know if you've like even tried to look at the mania in my chat, but
no.
Yeah, I high key I do not recommend you look at the chat. They're psychotic. But this happens in the gaming industry all the fucking time. Incredible profits, and then immediately just a mass layoffs that follow through, and that's a part of the financialization of every corporation that hyper focuses on the stock market and rather than the actual product that they're generating. And also on the government side, it can happen because there is not a single party that genuinely has the best interests of the working class citizens in mind. It's just there's no protection whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, on that, it really makes me think of, so again, this John Deere strike that might happen. They're going to vote on this contract on Sunday. It's 10,000 workers. They are offering a 2% wage increase and cutting pensions for all new hires. It's clearly like a total steal for the company. And this year they raised dividends 17%. So it's all these like stock payouts
Jesus
that are
Christ,
happening.
dude.
Bill Gates gave his ex-wife, or I think they broke up. Gave her like
And Melinda,
$800
my
million.
queen.
Melinda now has $800 million John Deere stock. So Bill Gates sees where the money is and puts his money on it, And the other thing is that you're right that nobody in power has working class interests at heart or structurally, you know what I mean? There's no party for the workers to really get their voice heard. But beyond that, they know what's happening. There was this press briefing with Jen Psaki in the White House where one of the reporters is like, hey, this John Deere strike, like, this could really pop off. It'd be huge. I mean, it's like, it's like these white working class people in the heartland that you're supposed to care about, and they're getting screwed. And Jen Psaki is like, well, we don't talk about labor disputes, but
why not?
The CEO made, first of all, why not? And
that's not even true because Joe Biden has talked about it. He talked about Bessemer, Alabama, which was historic in many ways.
And then she gives away the whole plot when she's like, but the CEO made, I don't know how deep she went into it, but she was like, the CEO made like $30 million last year, and we think the workers should get a fair share. So what's right. I mean, it's not, it's common sense now. The New York Times, for whatever you want to criticize about it, will put on the front page, income inequality, unions down, stories about it. So it's not like they're like, in the 90s, I feel like they used to pretend, they're like, what's going on here? Why isn't this getting better for anyone? And now everyone knows it. Joe Biden knows it. He says he knows it and still won't do anything. You have miners in Alabama, coal miners. These are like the people you say you want to reach. 1,000 on strike for 6 months. 700 nurses in Massachusetts on strike for 6 months. Nobody lifting a finger to do anything about this? Like, what do you expect? If that's what happens when workers fight back, you're going to get steamrolled, and corporate America takes the hint, let alone all these non-union people, as you point out. Like, if that's what a union coal miner gets, what the fuck does a Dollar General worker get,
Yeah, exactly. The coal miner is supposed to be like the one worker that we fucking care about. He's like, right? That's the 50,000 coal miners that are in the United States of America right now, like working. Those are the main guys, right? If you can't even fucking protect the coal miners, then that you offer lip service to, who the fuck do you care about? Right. The Alabama one is actually really interesting. The coal mine strike. Wait, this is the one that is about the $1.1 billion that were stolen from them, basically. Just straight up as they shut off the mine, right? And then they still extracted all the is that the one I'm thinking of? The one where they extracted the fucking coal mine, or the coals even that they have worked on, even after they had fired them or shut off the mines?
My coworker Luis Feliz Leon at Labor Notes has this great story about it, about this $1.1 billion. They had this private equity company take over, and they were like, oh, we took on all this debt, so we can't afford to do, to pay you guys anything. You're gonna take wage cuts for like 5 years. And eventually the workers are like, you guys are making crazy money. Like, you have this fake financialized private equity debt thing, but it's like owned by like BlackRock, It's like these coal mines are owned by the Wall Street people and playing poverty when they have fucking trillions of dollars, And you can only go so long before a coal miner is like, that doesn't seem right. And if I don't do anything about it, I'm literally going to like starve or lose my job. So and now is the time for everybody who put a coal miner on stage for the past 20 years to say, whatever. You don't even have to say shit about how you stand on fracking and the Green New Deal. Let's just talk about these 1,000 guys who are working in coal mines, and they're working in steel coal that makes steel. We need steel. Anyway, whatever. I'm just saying, here they are ready for you. They're on their own fight, and if you're not there, it's bullshit. I mean, anyone who wants to talk about coal miner from now on, if you weren't there on the Warrior Met strike in Alabama, doesn't mean shit.
Yeah. It's such an easy layup too. Like, it will pay off in dividends from if we're going to put on our fucking wonk hats for a moment, like, this is literally a gimme. This is such an easy fucking layup to be like, fuck you, BlackRock. This is bullshit. Figure it out. Fix it.
Right. There's no swing voter Joe Biden needs to worry about offending when he says, I stand with those guys, not with the BlackRock guys.
But but whenever I talk about this sort of stuff, it's like my hatred for the Democratic Party grows so much more because, like, they don't even want to do the easy fucking layups because they don't care. It's not a part of their electoral calculations.
Right.
Because in our two-party system, we have, we basically have designed a system so perfect that, like, the other side is evil and scary because of all these culture war issues that do not impact the material conditions at all whatsoever. There's no need to ever talk about labor. There's no need to ever talk about, like, better wages. You can offer lip service every now and then, but you don't actually have to act or react on it. Which is why I'm supporting Andrew Yang and the Forward Party. Not left, not right, but forward.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. But
I'm just
that
kidding,
joke
Chad.
kind of holds it. That holds it, right? You're like, there's nowhere the fuck else to go. So what are we supposed to do politically? And the answer is not like break now and have, a workers' party. It wouldn't win. It'd be like Andrew Yang's Forward Party. But the answer has to be, you can't just be cool with this. We can't just keep cutting the check to the same people who never did anything. And this is what kills me about the Democratic Party and some of the unions is like, fight. I expect the boss to be a piece of shit, right? Like, I'm not shocked that John Deere or this Warrior Met Coal or these huge healthcare companies or the Hollywood studios, am I shocked that they're like, trying to cut wages and make more money? No. What am I supposed to? They're not my friend. But the union has to be willing to fight, and the Democratic Party has to be willing to fight. And the reason, you get pissed off about it and you don't get pissed off about the GOP as much is because they're supposed to be fucking evil. That's their whole thing. Like, they believe in bad shit.
Yeah, they're the party of managers and bosses, and the Democratic Party is supposed to be the counterweight to that, the counterbalance to that.
Yes. And the fact that, like, you can't blame everything on the failure of the Democratic Party or the failure of the forces that are supposed to fight for the working class. You can't blame everything on that. There is an offensive from business capital, of course. But I feel like, our whole thing at Labor Notes is like, this is supposed to be a labor movement. You're supposed to have a movement there. And if you're not having a movement that's ready to fight, that's ready to represent its members directly, that lets regular ass working class people run their own unions and go on strike and negotiate for the things they care about, then what's the point, And like, that's, to me, the task is both in the Democratic Party and in the unions, is like, get people to challenge that status quo, run for union office. And it works. I mean, people do it, right? Like the Bernie shit, I know you can be blackpilled on it, but it changed the entire landscape of our politics. And in unions, it's true too. When you have people challenge this old school do nothing style, it really does change things. Like the Chicago teachers are the classic example. 10 years ago, you had these people who were like, this fucking union won't do anything. And they ran for office and they won, and they went on this strike that basically started the strike wave we're seeing today. It started in the teachers movement and exploded out from there. So I just feel like, what people need to be thinking about is like, how do you intervene in this? You need the do nothing people to feel like there's a fire under the ass. And today we saw Chuck Schumer tweeting about a strike of nurses in Buffalo. I'm like, fuck it. If it takes Chuck Schumer, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, that's a sign that we're moving something.
Here's one thing I will mention as well for all the chatters. We've been talking about bullying Kyrsten Sinema when she's taking fat dookies in the Arizona bathrooms. That is just you blowing off steam. You have no power whatsoever to guide a out of touch piece of shit like Kyrsten Sinema into doing anything. If anything, you can maybe apply pressure in the right places, like the party structure, the people who are supposed to be whipping her, maybe even literally whipping her. That would be fucking cool. Or jailing her. That would also be cool. But At this stage, you have no power. You can just like bully her, make her feel uncomfortable. That's just fucking, blowing off some steam. And that's fine. But unions actually do have power. The only way to demonstrate that power is by showing the bosses that if you stop working, well, you have no fucking value, because there's no value without labor. And at a time when labor is seemingly irreplaceable, okay, as a consequence of all the shortages, I mean, this is the perfect opportunity to strike while the iron is hot. That's actual demonstration of power, by the way. Not like fucking yelling at Kirsten Sinema in a bathroom. But you should do that, by the way. I don't have a problem with that at all. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it builds the muscle. It's like you got to get pissed off and do that stuff and learn how to talk some shit. But yeah, I mean, like, look, man, UPS, right? Say what you want about working at UPS. UPS drivers make $34 an hour, something like that. And why do they make that? Is because a history of striking and fighting back. And the last time they struck was in 1997. So this shit lasts, right? Like, that's a generation of people with a decent job that they can build a family around and live a life of basic dignity, just have, maybe buy a house even, right? So it's without this kind of labor fight back, all the other stuff is, even if we win it, will be fleeting, right? There's no way to hold on to it. So I totally agree with you. I mean, it's the necessary condition.
Let's talk about the positives. Also, you mentioned house. Chat's fucking lighting up. Socialism is when no house. Jonah, I'm sorry, you're ridiculous for even bringing that up. But everybody knows this, according to Ben Shapiro, who knows what socialism is.
I thought you worked at UPS, right? That's why you have that house.
Yeah. So no, I'm the true proletarian, obviously a humble worker, as I always have presented myself. So the thing I want to talk to you about is I want to talk to you about the positives, right? I want to talk to you about inspiring people, getting people excited. There's a lot of labor action happening right now, as you already stated. Can you give us like a brief analysis of everything that has happened in the past couple of weeks?
Oh man, I mean, I think in the past 5 days, something like 8,000 new workers have gone on strike, which is just crazy numbers. So stuff that's happening right now, this week you had 2,000 telecom workers walk out of work for a day for Frontier Communications in California. You have 2,000 hospital workers in Buffalo striking for safe staffing, like patient ratios, so people can not die in the hospital. You have blue collar workers. You have people in West Virginia. There's 2 strikes there that are like 15 minutes apart from each other. Kellogg is a huge one, just popped off. That's in 4 states. And like I said, these are, they make Frosted Flakes and they're blue collar workers.
But I need to stop you there for a second. I have a food sensory issue, and if I don't eat my Frosted Mini Wheats, like I don't know what will happen. So have you ever centered?
What will happen is that the workers will win the strike. So
yeah. Have you centered your workplace action around my individual experiences for a second? You're being very ableist.
I'm centering you right now. That's what I can tell you. Giving you my full.
You know what I'm referencing, right? I'm sure you've seen that tweet.
I've seen it. I mean, every strike, there's always. Look, I think something people need to. I don't know about the ableism discourse or whatever. It's fine. It's not really the point. I think the point is, like, in every strike, people are like, this collective action thing is fucking me up personally. What's that about? And the answer is, like, you got to start thinking that way. I mean, if you're even in your workplace, like, not that you have to be a martyr and your shit is going to get worse because you join with other people, but like, you cannot keep thinking you're going to cut a side deal. That is what gets the race to the bottom. The thing that your boss wants the most is to have an individual meeting with all your 5 coworkers, right? The thing they want the least is for all 5 of you to go in the office together and be like, "What'd you give him? I'm getting that too." I mean, that's the basics of the union thing. And I mean, one of the things, I'll just say, zoom out. One of the things that's really important about this strike wave to me is it creates a sense of collective action. That's the thing we miss, right? You're like, what the fuck? I'm just on my computer on Twitch and I'm just, like, alone, and what could I possibly do? What connection do I have to other people? When you see literally, I mean, if you've been to a picket line, it's an amazing experience where you're like, damn, all these fucking people are out here to support just the small group that are in the factory or in, at the school or whatever it is. So anyway, yes, I've seen the discourse. I abstain from the discourse.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're a coward and an ableist. It's fine. Okay. um. So we got Kellogg's going on. You want to talk a little bit about the IATSE? I fucking say it wrong every time.
IATSE. But
IATSE.
if you meet one of these guys, you should say the IA. That's like the cooler insider thing to say, is the IA. Yeah, they're it's huge. It's I don't know how many details you want. There's 2 contracts. They're expiring. Huge strike authorization vote, 98%, meaning, tens of thousands of people voted and say, yes, I'm ready to strike. Yes, I want to do it. Let's do it. These are people who do a ton of different stuff. It's like, maybe 50 different job classifications, probably more. I don't know. And they're Hollywood, but they're everywhere. They work everywhere on the East Coast too, and a ton in like Georgia, Oklahoma, everywhere. These are people who, they set up all the cameras and they rig everything and they do everything that makes film and TV work. And the big thing about these workers is they're working like 14, 16-hour days. There's all these stories. You can go on Instagram and see this stuff. Or sorry, maybe it's on Twitch too. You can see people being like, I fell asleep at the wheel because I worked like a 19-hour shift. It was time for my next shift.
I lost you there for a second. You said you fell asleep at the wheel because you were working, or the person was saying they were working 19-hour shifts, so they fell asleep at the wheel.
Yes, this is like a common thing that you can see these like testimonials. So these are like, they work a film set for 20 hours straight. They fall asleep at the wheel, end up with huge bills in the hospital, just like horror stories. So these people are these people who basically run film sets and TV sets are the big thing of the strike is like, let me get some fucking time off. Like, that's it. It's not even like there's wages, there's benefits, things involved in that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But like the core thing is like, I'm working my life away. And it goes back to this understaffing thing I'm talking about. Like, everybody who's still working, who's on the job right now, especially in-person jobs, is working like people are like, I've never seen something like this. I'm getting forced into 16-hour shifts every other day.
Yeah. The contracts that were originally negotiated on were negotiated in a drastically different time. These with the Motion Picture Association, like, these were contracts negotiated all the way back in like 2013, I believe, when like the streaming services were not the main method of movie distribution, and that they were just like, come on guys, we're not making a lot of money, so just fucking we'll renegotiate them down the line. And I think COVID really showed that streaming was obviously a match for the movie screen and cinemas, and there are blockbusters literally being released on streaming services. So I think it's time for the Motion Picture Association to absolutely meet the demands of the workers that work behind the scenes. So yeah, there was some other questions I wanted to ask you, but is there anything else you wanna talk about, like any specific drive that's going on right now? How can people also help out other than show solidarity and obviously, like, don't break the fucking don't cross the picket line, don't be a scab. People might not know what that is. You want to explain to them what a fucking scab is?
Yeah, strictly what a scab is somebody who works at a workplace that's on strike. So obviously Kellogg right now, they don't have anyone to move the cereal to get the plants running. So they're hiring people, they're bringing people in to work the jobs that the strikers would be usually working. And obviously, if this isn't clear, the reason this kills the strike is because it means that it's no pain for Kellogg. They keep product moving. And a funny thing about this, I feel like you'll like, in 2014, there was a lockout in Memphis at the Kellogg plant, and they brought in scabs, and there was video that came out of them peeing all over the cereal. So you bring in these people who like have no connection to the company and have no interest in, a lot of the time don't have any history doing it. And they're desperate people, whatever, you can have sympathy for them, but they're undermining the entire fucking thing. So don't ever be a scab. Do not ever work a job where there's anyone on strike. The other thing is not crossing the picket line, which is slightly different, saying basically don't do business with somebody who has a strike going. So don't buy your Frosted Flakes. I mean, you have to look whatever. There's rules about boycotts whether the union's actually calling for it, and you shouldn't, go on Twitter and say something stupid about something you don't know about boycott this or that. But you're trying to. I mean, the goal of the strike is to hurt the company for that moment so that they will have some
Yeah.
leverage, right? That's the whole point. So you got to get that in your head and behave accordingly. How you can support it otherwise, I mean, I would say two things. One, show up and donate to strike funds. They're floating around. They're often kind of just GoFundMe's and things like that. I wish the labor movement was better organized about the strike funds. But when you see one of those, put money in there. How much money is in the strike fund is how long they can stay on strike. How long they can stay on strike is how much leverage they have on the company. That's it. I mean, it's like basically that equation. So give money if you have money to give. And the other thing I would say is that like part of what's hard to remember about this is that what you can do is organize your workplace. You are responsible for where you work and your community. Whether or it's like, your mom is it's like help her organize a union at her workplace. This is what's going to lift people up. The best thing you can do for nurses at Kaiser right now is have the rest of the healthcare industry get better organized so the floor is higher. So they're not facing this target on their back, and their employer can't say, look, over there, they'll do whatever we ask them to. So you have to also. So you got to get your own shit organized. Wherever you work, you need to be thinking about, you can call it a union or not, but you need to be thinking about how are we going to raise standards on my job? And not just for me. You're not trying to get a side deal. You're trying to say, how do we fix this industry? And almost any industry you're in, I'm telling you right now, needs fixing. So if you're making 18 bucks an hour, you should be making 22 bucks an hour. You should be fighting for a raise. And if you don't, it's going to go the other way eventually. So I would say like the biggest thing you can do, the most solidarity thing you can do, the thing you can do to support unions is organize your own shit.
Yeah. The union is the most anti-left thing ever. Wow. Incredible take from a chatter. Sorry. I also love doing this. I love like pulling individual baboons from the chat and just fucking berate them a little bit. It's just blowing off a little bit of steam here. Sorry.
Yeah, your own personal Christian cinema.
No, it's my favorite thing to do. Anyway, so yeah, we like to do a little bit of public square executions here in the form of bannings. Anyway, I'm thinking of like common counters that you would like to address. You know what I mean?
Yeah, union busting. I mean, there's so much bullshit that you will hear about unions that you just have to cut through. You have to remember the people telling you it have a financial incentive for you to not unionize. Like you said way earlier, like just on a population level, union jobs pay 10 to 20% more than non-union workers, right? So that's the bottom line. That's what's motivating them. So you got to keep that in your head. So whether it's they say we're a family, we have an open door policy,
they always
we
say
don't want
the union is the outsiders.
Yes, a
coming in.
a third party, right?
Yeah.
Is it a third party if like you and your buddy go to your boss together? Is that a third party? How about if you add two more to that? Like when does it become a third party? It's not a third party.
Yeah.
Everything, I mean, what you should know about unions, I mean, this is, but like contracts are voted on. People who run the union are elected. There's sometimes when it's not, it's like you wish it was better, but like they're some of the most democratic institutions we have left in our society. They're more democratic than your public school. They're more democratic than your public library. They're more democratic than anything you've ever done. And like the idea that it's a third party is just total bullshit. I mean, what motivating that is the money.
But hold on, it's a third party coming in that's organizing all of you and your coworkers in an effort to have a seat at the table with the bosses so you can literally be like, yo, chill the fuck out. Like you're overworking us like crazy. But what if you want to buy a PlayStation 5 instead of your union dues, for example?
A much better plan is to get a 5% raise and buy it with that money.
Boom. Exactly. Completely ignore the mob influence with union rep, says a dusted Ewok. What do you say to that? Where's Hoffa?
Where's Hoffa?
No, I'm saying
Hoffa,
that. I'm asking you. Answer this.
I think he's maybe in the Meadowlands. I feel like they say Giant Stadium. That's what most Teamsters would tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a history of corruption in unions, but you have to put this in perspective. What about the mob influence in the corporate world? What about like
Yeah.
building Las Vegas? Like, what about every boss ever who's like taking money from the government, breaking the law, and killing workers on the job? Like, is that corrupt? I have a lot of sympathy for talking about corruption in the unions because of what we talked about before, that it's such a disappointment and such a disservice to the cause. But if you're really going to look at it, be like, where's the corruption in the economy? The corruption is in huge amounts of wage theft. It's in like people getting killed on their job and families getting no money for it. Like that's the corruption. So yeah, isolated cases where members are really like, fuck, there's people corrupting my union and we need to have it be, reformed in some way. That's important. Workers need to control their own unions. But the idea that the union movement is corrupt is like laughable. And it's another boss line. I mean, it just is. Whose interest does that serve to say like whatever. You
No,
look at a
it's
union,
the
go meet a local union president. It's some dude who's like a civic activist and lives down the street from you. Is he like mobbed up? That's like psycho.
well, the other side of this, always, like you also pointed out, is that like if corruption is inevitable, I'd rather have a fucking institution designed by all of the other workers to protect the workers rather than the expected corruption that is not only normalized but legal and also expected in the authoritarian corporate structure. Like if there is like an inevitability with like a little bit of corruption, okay, I would be siding with an institution that is democratized when there's always still going to be a little bit of corruption in a country where the number one form of theft is fucking wage theft. It's preposterous and laughable that people are always like, oh, the unions are the corrupt ones. It's the most cucked shit ever. These people are just gigantic fucking cucks. Or whenever people say stuff like, oh, what about unions protecting the worst workers? It's like the worst worker is 100% the smartest one in the group because he's not trying to work super hard. Why the fuck do you want to work super hard so your bosses can make more money, dumbass?
Right. Like, or like, how about a company protecting a CEO making $30 million a year? Like,
yeah, literally.
What's the problem with that? I mean, I would also just say on corruption, there's incredible cases like right now. These are really live things. Huge corruption cases in the Teamsters Union in the 80s when they talk about mobbed up. That really was mobbed up. And there's a huge corruption scandal in the UAW, the Auto Workers Union, who make, Ford and GM and Fiat Chrysler cars and other stuff like that. There's corruption scandals in those unions. And in both of those cases, you had members, like working regular ass people, say, fuck this, we're getting the corruption out of here. And in the UAW, they're trying to do it now, switch to direct elections of officers because they're like, fuck the corruption. And in the Teamsters, they did it in the 80s. And then in the 90s, had the biggest strike in my entire life. So like the idea that like, oh, unions are corrupt, so they need to be stay out of the workplace. Like working class people who go through that and suffer from that corruption historically have responded to it saying, fuck that, we don't want corruption in these unions, and they fight it and win, and I support that totally. But the idea that like your local teachers union is like stealing the dues to go to whatever, it's like you just out of your mind. It's just not, it's not true. I mean, the superintendent is going on trips with your money. That's who's taking your money.
Yeah. Currently, the point is, currently there's no one looking out for you. If you're in a workplace and you're not unionized, there's absolutely no one looking out for you. There's no one on your side. But when you are in a unionized workplace, you at least have an institution, an organization that is comprised of others exactly like you, that have the exact same financial interests as you, fighting for your best interest. And you pay a percentage of your salary back to that so that they can, better protect you, give you legal protection at times when you need it, hire a lawyer at times when you need it, have strike funds when you want to demonstrate that organizational power that you have fought for or that others have fought for before you. And that's why it is absolutely ridiculous to me whenever people fucking come in here and defend their bosses rather than unionizing their workplace. There's some real fears, obviously, as far as unionizing, like starting to unionize in a country that is absolutely fucking captured completely by the interests of capital and a government that doesn't really do anything for the citizens. It's an understandable fear to have that you might get fucking fired for even trying to unionize. But guess what? The other side of that is if you get fired for trying to unionize, you can get a fucking fat payout, dude. Like, serious, because it's illegal. They can't do that to you. They will try to claim that like you did something wrong. But guess what, dude? There's a lot of public lawyers that would defend you. You can make a fat fucking paycheck from that. I'm just saying.
And the other side of it is, what's the alternative? You're just going to sit and take it? What, for 40 years, you're going to work a job for $12 an hour? Is that your answer? Like, that's not an answer. I get that it's easier to be like, I'd rather not, or I'm scared, or I don't really get how it works, or it's a pain in the ass. That's all true. But what's the alternative, man? I mean, like, we're all going down if nobody does anything about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, one last thing. Sorry, I'm just fucking exploiting your labor so hard right now. But I really appreciate that you're here. What do you think about company unions, like corporate unions? What the fuck?
Again, like an incredibly rare. You mean like a union that's like dominated by the employee, like a fake union? That's
a fake union.
the
Like
boss
apparently, Kroger has a corporate union, which I thought was illegal, by the way, but
it is illegal. I wonder what exactly what they mean by that. I mean, it's a real rarity stuff. I think it's like, it's a curiosity. It's interesting. It's like has very little to do with like the basics of the union movement. So like, I do this newsletter and I track all this stuff every week. When I find stuff like that, I'm like, oh shit, a company union. That's totally bizarre. And it's usually some weird ass,
or other
oddity.
formations like the gig economy formations that Uber will secretly fund. Like in New York, what is that fucking group called?
Yeah, the Independent Drivers Guild is one of them.
Yeah, the Independent Drivers Guild, which act like they care about the interests of the gig economy drivers, but then is literally just like a formation built to hurt the unionization or the even employee status battle that gig economy workers try to fight for. Every now and then they'll take a W, like they'll be like, oh yeah, we made this driver who got murdered on the job, we made their family get like compensation from Uber. And then everyone's like, oh shit, they have my back, like this is great. But then when push comes to shove and there's like actual labor organizing happening on that field, boom, all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we're not about this actually. This is bad.
Yeah. I mean, look, they exist, but like, God, you have to like search to find that stuff. And like the idea that you're like, I'm scared of, unionizing because what if it becomes a company union? Like, you're making excuses for yourself. That really is not the common thread of the labor movement. So like, I don't know. I think that stuff is interesting, but like there's 14 million union members. How many are company union members? Like, is there like 2,000 company union members? Like, I don't think so. So just like eyes on the prize, man. It's like unionize and get more money, or don't, and just sit and take it. Like, that's about the equation.
What do you say to it? This guy says, I'm a DoorDash driver, and I really don't think labor organization would help the average driver.
It's wrong. I mean, there's been studies and, like the problem is nobody speaks for the DoorDash drivers. You just have people picking out one or the other. This is the other thing a union does. You create an organization that can say, actually, we've looked at all the DoorDash drivers and here's the interests, but like, again, it's a blunt instrument, these unions. Like when you unionize, your wages go up, things go up for you and the whole industry. And that's true every industry. So whatever, we can argue about details of DoorDash. I've never worked for DoorDash, but I'm telling you that it's just not the case that a union, no union gets less pay than a non-union. Like, that's just not how it goes.
Okay. Last one. Could you ask Jonah about starting a union in a field that doesn't traditionally have it or the workers resist it, like IT?
Sure. I mean, it's exciting to see these like tech workers come into it. The first thing I say is like, there's actually no real such thing as a like non-union industry. There's industries that are like low density, but like last week, one of the things I tracked was these people who work at a bank in Oregon just got a union contract. Like, it's not common for people who work at banks to get it, but there's no reason, like there's no law against tech workers organizing, anything like that. The other thing I would say is like, there are alternative worker organizations. One of them I helped put together last year during the pandemic is called EWOC, EWOC. You can look up these alternative organizations that are basically like, you're not ready to form a union yet, right? There's 200,000 people at your workplace. You only know 3 of them. You want to just organize around some small issue to get started. Like, I totally encourage that stuff, and alternative like labor formations, all good. I mean, the end goal is some kind of organization that you and actually fight for your interests. But I don't think there's an industry that like, I can give you an example in any industry I feel like that has unionized. I mean, there's like last year they announced there's this new union of adult entertainment performers union, right? There's like strippers have unionized and are unionizing. Like, I don't know who I need to like pull out of my hat to show you that your industry can unionize, but it's a myth, and that stuff is like, you'll hear it from bosses too. I don't think you're not wrong to say it's not common, but like, there's no reason. Before the 30s, auto workers weren't union. You're like, you can't have a assembly line union, and now it's like that's all a union is to most people. So I just think there's a lot of myths, and the main thing to do is talk to your coworkers and start figuring out how are you going to approach your boss in a way that has collective power and can be clear about what you need.
And remember, unions are not organized on the basis of political affiliation, but on your material interests as a worker. This is something that escapes a lot of people that get trapped in this two-party system where they're just like, oh my God, I'm a Democrat. These guys are Republican hogs. Like, it doesn't fucking matter. Just like the same concept with like universal social safety nets, like Medicare for all, it doesn't fucking matter if someone's a dipshit or even a fucking racist. And for the record, unions have somewhat of a racist or, bad history, but that is no longer the case here in the United States of America. The black unionized labor force is a higher percentage than the white unionized labor force. Never let anybody tell you that unions are racist anymore or any longer. There are still, of course, racists in unions, obviously, but it doesn't fucking matter. Ultimately, what matters is you are improving the material conditions of every worker at a workplace, and that is opening up an opportunity for people like that to, well, one, learn from that solidarity and be introduced to a more diverse group of people and ideas, but also become less fucking reactionary as a consequence of their material conditions improving.
Yeah. I mean, just an example, if you want to look something up, like Arizona teacher strike. Obviously, Arizona, there's like 50,000 people or 40,000 people or something. There's a ton of people who are like Trumpers and like John McCain, every kind of like whatever reactionary, racist. There's these interviews people did, and they're like, damn, these people went on strike and their opinions about stuff just totally changed. They were like, oh shit, like maybe I do deserve like universal health care. Like, people change through the process of fighting for themselves. We talk a lot of shit. You're like, what am I, like red or blue? What's my political identity? That's, when the rubber meets the road, people will change through fighting for their material interests. And they can say like they like Trump or they like Joe Biden or whatever it is. And like, if you actually talk to people who've been through stuff like big strikes, especially, they are transformed by that. That's another reason that I'm like, seeing 100,000 people go on strike, that's 100,000 people who are about to have experience of, fuck, like I actually deserve something and I can actually fight for it. And if we can win, then I actually think it's worth, pursuing this kind of stuff in the future. Collective political activity, not political like, who you voted for, but political like who holds the power in my life.
Oh yeah. Last note, a lot of people keep talking about police unions. Fuck police unions. Police are not actual workers. They're class traders. Their entire job literally revolves around protecting the interests of capital. So it's not a fucking surprise that those are the only unions that are incredibly powerful. And their ultimate product is harm for the most part. Obviously, I'm not saying like, oh, abolish police or anything like that. There's still always going to be a need for a formation of people that are organized to, maintain a presence of law and order, blah, 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 all that good stuff. We get it. Okay. But as it stands currently, there are unjustifiable laws. There are really horrible laws. A lot of our legal system is designed in a way to hurt the poor and protect the interests of capital. And that's precisely what cops do. So, of course, their unions are fucking dog shit.
I would also say, it's really not the fact that they're unionized that makes them powerful. People like to be like, the police union is too powerful. They keep getting everything they want from the city. Well, the teachers union doesn't get everything they want. What's up with that? It's like
Yeah.
it's police. It's police. That's the thing about it. So like you can talk about police unions. There's a ton of opinions. I just think it's kind of missing the point. It's not the union. That's the thing. It's the social role of police. They control these cities. They have like Bill de Blasio's daughter's ID card or whatever it was. Like
Yeah,
when they were
just a
like,
fucking doxing Bill de Blasio's daughter,
it's like
threatening him, saying
crazy.
that fucking we'll murder you. Like, don't come to our fucking. Wasn't it the Sergeant
Right.
Benevolence Association? I mean, they just got raided by the FBI.
Yeah,
It was
they
really
just
funny.
got raided. Yeah.
Fuck those
I mean,
guys.
but like, it's not like in their union contract, like you are the mayor's daughter and we'll give you whatever you want. Like that's cop shit. It's not union shit. So I don't know. It's an interesting conversation, police unions, but I just am like, why are we,
Yeah.
it's not the union thing.
This is a really good take. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Yeah. And that's why historically they've always union busted, assisted capital owners. They've fucking they participate in strike busting. They literally fucking allow rats to scabs to cross the picket line and go into the workforce when the labor union members are outside fucking trying to hold the line. It's just they're dog shit. You don't really see that in America as much anymore because there's just simply no union activity for the most part. But like, you look to any like European country, look to fucking South Korea and places where there are unions, and you'll see cops beating the fucking shit out of labor union protesters who are striking. And it would happen in America as well if we had more labor activity. Yeah, they're not in solidarity with the workers.
Yeah, I mean, if you need a U.S. example, like in January, there was 1,000 workers in Hunts Point in the Bronx on strike, and they had a 24/7 picket, and they wouldn't let the trucks bring in the produce as a produce market. And the cops came and arrested a bunch of workers.
Yeah, Minnesota Line 3 protests were all, like literally the company hired cops to torture some of the protesters. Now that wasn't a union strike or anything like that, but like cops work with corporations directly and indirectly and all the time. That's their job. Their job is to protect the interests of capital.
Yeah. I mean, again, I would be like, we can talk about cops. Cops suck. Corporations suck. Why, like we should be talking about what are you going to do about it? It's like these little insular things of like, is the cop union good or is the cop union bad? If I don't like the cop union, do I not like unions? Like, you're missing the plot here. There's like a huge millions of union members who are ready to fight and millions of non-union members who need to get organized. And like, that's the punchline. The cops are going to be the cops and the company's going to be the company. But if nobody fights, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jonah, thank you so much for coming. I have to pee really bad. Okay?
Yeah. I don't know how you do that. You wear a diaper?
I don't. I am an Amazon worker after all, technically. So yeah, I'm peeing in.
Fuck.
I'm peeing in bottles all the time. Listen, where can we find more of your work? What do you want to plug here before we let you go? Thank you so much for coming on, by the way. This was wonderful. You were an incredible guest. Thank you for putting up with my bullshit.
It was good bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I shit post a little too hard sometimes, it's not great.
I'm getting better at shit posting. I want to plug first of all, it's Striketober, and I was instructed to inform everybody that, so the word is out. You should follow Labor Notes, just like it sounds, labornotes.org, or you can find us on social media. We cover the labor movement. I'm on Twitter, of course. I have a newsletter you can find there. The main thing is talk to everybody you know about the labor movement, about strikes, about organizing, unions. That's what it's going to take.
All right, perfect. Do you have like a compilation, or are you thinking about putting together a compilation of strike funds so that like it's easily accessible for people in this community and in other communities to be able to go and like potentially help fund some of that? I'm currently working on something as well. I have domestically manufactured, union labor produced merch apparel coming out soon, and one of the things I'm planning on doing is one of the shirts is going to have all profits go to strike funds. So I'm personally asking you, like, where is there like a way to just have like a list of people or I mean, a list of funds that people can easily access and help out.
Yeah, I mean, these pop up with strikes. The one you should give to now, if you got any extra money, is to the Kellogg workers strike. They have 3 funds in 3 cities. I don't know, sent you the link. I don't know how it fucking works, but
Don't
give
send it on
money to
Discord.
these.
Send it on Twitter DMs. If you send it to me on Twitter
All
DMs
right,
right
all
now,
right,
because
all
I
right.
can't click on it because
Yeah,
your face
hang
is
on.
on instead.
Yeah, right. Get my face out there. All right, I'm sending you on Twitter DMs. All right, that link will take you to 3 strike funds in 3 different factories. Give money to those guys. The more funding they have, the longer they can stay out, and the better chance they have of beating Kellogg.
Oh, here it is. Yeah. Okay, we'll get this popping off as well here in the
Hell yeah.
chat. Okay. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on, man. This was wonderful. And I will be bothering you further in the future to have you come and, shoot the shit and also inform everybody on things that are going on. I'm glad that you're no longer as pessimistic about the future of labor organizing in the United States. Because, like, I remember reading your tweet thread and I was like, damn, dude, this sucks. Like, what the fuck?
I mean, I don't know. You have to be like real about what's up. It's like when people are like, fuck the Democratic Party, but maybe we're going to get $3.5 trillion passed this week. Like, I don't know. Things are complicated. It changes.
No, I agree. All right. Well, thank you so much once again, Jonah.
Yeah. Thanks,
All right.
man.
Bye. All right, folks. That was Jonah Furman of labornotes.org. It was wonderful to have him on. Obviously, I'm a disgusting capitalist pig dog, as you already know. So, fuck the unions and all that stuff. It was just, this was secret. I was secretly trying to act like I'm simply a fan of the working class so I can keep grifting. But new Second Thought video ties into this perfectly. We'll watch that right now. And then after that, I am going to talk about... I used to install conveyor for Amazon. At a job in California, we worked 32 days straight. Weekly hours were 5 to 10 hours a day, 2 to 8 hour days. Yeah. What was I gonna do here? Oh, there's like a lot of fucking links that I opened up. I'm trying to fix it real quick. I wanna